Welcome. My name is Kelly.
My name's Jamie. Sorry.
And this is Fanimated, an animation fan podcast where we get to geek out about our favorite animated media and also surprise our guests by starting the podcast recording before they're ready.
No, that was my fault because I said, I'm ready, let's go. And then immediately I noticed that my headphone was like, the cord of it was like swinging and hitting a thing, and I started panicking like, oh no, that's probably gonna make sound. And then I heard Kelly say, my name's Kelly, and then my brain like froze up.
That's your cue, Jamie.
Yeah. It was just a mess. This whole operation is a disaster. Okay, we're good. Everything's fine. How are you doing, guys? How's everybody doing? I'm doing great. Thank you for asking.
Well, this whole episode will be just a continuous train wreck, pun intended.
Hey! I love it.
We're talking about Infinity Train this episode.
You guys, we're finally talking about Infinity Train. Oh my gosh, I'm so excited.
Before we started recording, you said I'm the only person you know that has watched this.
Yeah. In real life. So, like, other than that, all I have are basically, like, reading opinions online and such. But having a real person in the real human world who knows about it is pretty exciting, yeah.
As opposed to the internet people who are not also real people on the other side of a screen.
The digital world. It's like the human world, but not. I mean, it is, but... But
with more tweets.
Yeah. the internet. It's like the regular world, but more tweets. Oh, yeah, it checks out, yeah.
Perfect. Yeah, I also don't know a lot of people who have watched this, which surprises me a lot. Because I feel like, especially on the internet, it is very popular. Like, I feel like this is a very popular show. But apparently not as popular as I think. Yeah,
it's interesting how it definitely hasn't reached the level of some of the really big famous cartoons from like the last decade. It definitely isn't as popular as like a Steven Universe or an Adventure Time or anything more recent even. But it does have a smaller, very, very passionate group of fans that are currently lobbying to get it renewed. We might be jumping forward a bit here, but there's a lot of people who really, really want this show to be saved, quote unquote, from its pretty disappointing cancellation.
Yes.
Which is, yeah.
It's a bummer. And that's great. We'll just jump into it because we need to talk about the production stuff first, which is unusual for the podcast. Usually on Fanimated, we talk about the story and then talk about production, but we've got so much story to sift through that I figure
we're saving it.
Yeah, we should start with some production notes.
Oh yeah.
The Infinity Train. I always want to say it's not it's just Infinity Train.
It's just Infinity Train, right?
Infinity Train was created by Owen Dennis back, early 2010s. Cartoon Network had this initiative to try out some mini series. So that's where you get things like Over the Garden Wall, which is one of my faves.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. And Owen Dennis created a pilot episode for Infinity Train that was released in November of 2016. It was available on YouTube, Cartoon Network's official YouTube, and featured basically the first run of the Corgi car episode with meeting Atticus, the Corgi, the king of corgis.
That's the best. King and uniter of the something in the darn it. He had a whole speech because he's very kingly and regal, but I can't remember it. Yeah.
Yes. Oh, he's great. And I don't know about you, but I remember watching this on YouTube and being like, man, this is so cool. And I know back in the day I was like, this is great, but we'll probably never get a run.
Yeah. I think I had a similar feeling, or I just forgot about it. The second one's probably more likely.
Yeah.
But I remember seeing this absolutely bonkers little short. I think at the time I might not have even known what we were looking at exactly, so maybe I thought it was just like some weird student animated, like short animation film. about this girl who's in this weird place full of dogs, and people keep calling it a train for some reason, and then there's a robot, and then they have to escape, and it was just this weird little thing, and I had no idea what to make of it. And it was called Infinity Train, and I was like, well, that was fun. And then 4 years later, everything changed.
Yes. Finally, in August 2019, they released the full miniseries, the first season of Infinity Train. And we'll definitely get into each of the seasons.
Oh, yeah.
But I was so excited about that one. That one I definitely followed and was very excited for. Then they really just kicked out these seasons really quickly. Second season was January 2020. Then it switched to HBO Max for season 3 in August of 2020. And then the fourth season just released April of 2021. And originally, this show was supposed to be just HBO Max, but the platform had not come out as soon as they were expecting. So that's why there's the initial releases on Cartoon Network and then the HBO Max releases. But as we were saying, Owen Dennis has plans for up to 8 seasons.
Yeah.
And he actually has a completed script for the next part, which would, and we'll talk about Amelia in a bit, but would have been focused on Amelia.
Yes. Oh, man, that's so sad.
Yeah, and they have canceled it. From what I hear, it sounds like the producers canceled it because the script was very dark and not appropriate for children. And I can only imagine. But personally, I'm kind of like, this show isn't necessarily for kids. And right. I feel like they just need to market it for adults. And then it would work because, like, I can imagine a whole story just about Amelia, and we'll, again, get into it. But, like, being so hard and dark for sure, but like really fascinating and really, really great.
I think it's kind of running into a similar problem that we've seen. I think it's even popped up on this show quite a few times. The problem of like a mostly American audience having the stigma that cartoons are childish, and like it's gonna be tricky to convince a lot of people otherwise. Yeah. And if you can't convince a lot of people otherwise, then unfortunately the powers that be are probably not going to continue giving you a show, right? Like
exactly.
And that's especially frustrating for a series like this because I don't want to sound pretentious when I say this, but I don't think kids can fully appreciate it. Like that sounds so like, oh, you don't understand the show like I do. But like there are so many and I don't just mean dark stuff like violence or intense moments or stuff like that. There are also just very somber ideas, and of course we'll get into it later, but there's just more, for lack of a better word, more grown up concepts and relationships and ideas that appear in this story that I absolutely would not have understood if I watched this when I was like 10, you know?
Absolutely.
Yeah, and that's really kind of a shame because it still has that stereotype of like, but it's a cartoon, so it must be for kids, and like that's really just not the case.
Exactly. It's so much more than that. And for the kids, kids are smarter than we think too. So like a lot of kids are probably getting a lot out of it. I mean, granted, there are some things that I would question letting a child view. We'll get into it.
I know what you're talking about.
But like, yeah, I feel like, especially looking at, Amelia. Amelia is a character who is an adult. We only see her as an adult. And if they were giving her backstory in depth, for example, like, like maybe there's no child entry point because there's no child character. And, I guess that's the question of like, having someone a child viewer can relate to. But then again,
I
like
could see that being a problem from the studio perspective, I guess.
yeah. But I think of like, I feel like it could be doable if that's the reason that they were, canceling it. Like, I don't know. I feel like 1-1 is a great child entry point. Like, and again, we'll get into all these characters, but yeah, it's just something to think about how this show is definitely one of those Western animated series that really teeter the line of where it's, its audience is for everyone.
Right.
Is it for kids? Is it for adults? Both and also none. Like,
yeah. Oh my goodness.
It's an enigma.
I've been trying to pinpoint what it is about this show that makes it stick with me so much. Even among some other favorites that I've run across recently, and I think it might be because of that combination, like you said, because there's so much that appeals to, not necessarily childish sensibilities, but things that you love when you're a kid, of adventure and like the weird creativity of it and the fun characters and stuff like that. But it balances that with so many complicated and more, I guess, intriguing things that happen and things that the characters find, and it's really something special. And yeah.
Exactly. It is truly, truly special. And before we get into discussing each season individually, just kind of like the broad synopsis for this show.
Yep.
So spoiler warning if you haven't seen it. I highly recommend that you do. But
guys, I know we say this every time, but you gotta watch Infinity Train. Like, I don't think the best way of experiencing it would be to listen to this first and then go watch it, because there's so many surprises. There's so many things where it's so fun and fascinating to experience it firsthand. I can't recommend it enough.
Exactly. And the broad overview idea behind Infinity Train is there's this magical train that is seemingly infinite.
Yep, just gigantic.
Huge. And it picks up random passengers who are the humans from our normal world, and they get sucked into the life of this train. So each car in the train, and this is the really ingenious part of making this a series where writers can do whatever they want with it. Each car is an entirely different world. So, and they're all crazy and just a little off.
Oh yeah, definitely.
So you've got, cars that have a beach. It's a beach, and it's like these weird water people.
Even though that, like, with physics, that doesn't totally make sense, but don't question it.
It's bigger on the inside. It's
it's all very Doctor Who, for sure.
Yeah. And then there's a car that's just a huge, giant crossword puzzle. So,
oh my gosh.
You got a wide range of things. And the purpose of this train is to help those passengers deal with some sort of internal struggle. And we'll go through like our characters and what they're dealing with. But each passenger has a number on their hand, and when that number reaches 0, then they are able to get off the train and go back home. But getting the number down to 0 is definitely a challenge sometimes.
Oh yeah, 100%.
And they've really got to wrestle with their own personal things and grow as characters, which really just, it's such a fascinating, interesting concept that just like leaves the door wide open for all sorts of creative explorations. And that's what this short show does. Like, it's really, truly fascinating, and all the characters go on completely different journeys. And that's what makes this show so fantastic.
Oh my god, I can't wait to talk about the difference between the seasons. The whole thing of the train and the numbers and the personal growth is, I think one of the reasons I love it so much is they give a in a weird way, there's a mystery-like tone, because at the beginning of the show, you don't know this information. And with the first character that they're following, you don't learn this right away. So there's almost some, like, fear elements and horror elements of, like, what is this number? What does it mean when it goes down? The first time it goes down, it's kind of freaky, because you don't know if that's a bad thing. And, like, you don't know why the train is here. You don't understand why one car will be, like... One car will be like a normal-sized train car with like a puzzle in the middle, and then the next car will be like this just enormously huge car full of ducks for no reason. And like the characters don't know why, and they just have to figure out like little bit by bit what's going on. And that weird discovery element of it is so much fun. And even when you do know the basic premise of how the numbers are supposed to go down, the train's trying to help you learn stuff about yourself, even when you have learned that, there's still so much more to explore, and there's so many twists and ways that changes with your understanding of it and the different perspectives of the different people who don't all agree about how the train works. And that was such a good idea. Oh my goodness. The multiple facets and multiple viewpoints, just I could go on about it for days. It's so fun.
It's so fascinating. So again, go watch it.
Yeah.
But for those of you who have watched it or are ready for the spoilers, let's just go through season by season. Let's start with book 1 with Tulip, our passenger, our protagonist, who is just a girl. She's kind of dealing with her parents' divorce, and she just wants to go to game design camp.
She's just trying to get to Oshkosh, Wisconsin. It's not that complicated.
Oh dear. And she ends up on the Infinity Train and meets my favorite character.
Oh my gosh.
1-1.
1-1. 1-1 is incredible.
1-1 is a robot who is this little ball, but he can split into two, and so he'll like scuttle around on his little tiny robot legs.
Oh yeah.
And then he'll come back and he'll roll around. He's definitely got some type of multi-personality disorder in which he is both the most optimistic, peppy person or character, as well as the most pessimistic and concerning and sad character.
It's really something.
It is my favorite. Like everything 1-1 does hits my funny bone exactly the right way, because he's like, this is great, we're all gonna die.
Yeah. The writing on a character with that duality it's so interesting to me, because it strikes me that it could be really, like, it feels like it could be really cliche. Like, I can picture having two characters, one's happy, one's sad. It could be like super uninteresting, but they nail the writing, and the voice acting, of course, is just phenomenal. So it, like, every time he says anything in his happy voice, you're like so endeared to him, and he's such a fun, innocent, like, wholesome character. And then immediately, every time he says anything in the depressed voice, it just cuts through all of that, and the writing is so good. That's just the funniest thing I've ever heard. And like, it becomes
absolute
this
gold.
Having that person as sort of a side character hanging out with the protagonist, it just makes for the goofiest situations. It's so much fun.
What's great about them is that Tulip is a very, very logical thinker, and she overthinks everything. And then 1-1 is that piece of chaos that that just like erupts everything and just which able to
would be the opposite, because he's the robot, but
right. That he's the one that's not as logical or on track. Yeah. So the two of them together just make for a really perfect duo. And they balance each other out really, really well. And like you said, like, this is the season where we don't know what's going on until the very end. We don't understand anything about the train or the numbers or anything. And so, like, Tulip is just trying to get off the train. She's just trying to get off. She doesn't know if the numbers are good or bad or what. And that for me, like, I'll just say right now, like, it makes this first season, even though 1-1 is my favorite character of all the seasons, it's not necessarily my favorite season because I almost prefer going into seasons and just being like, oh, here's the premise, here's the idea, and then we're going to go explore it, rather than like...
Oh, I think I gotcha, yeah.
Because, you know, it might seem strange because I really love mysteries and I really love like some unknown things, but I feel like because I was just confused the whole time and not sure about anything, like it didn't feel as impactful maybe.
I think that's fair, yeah. Balancing the discovery of answers and stuff with like the character story is super interesting because sometimes you can kind of get distracted from one or the other. And it's tricky to have them both happening at the same time, for sure.
And like you get this, you know, all of the seasons really, like some episodes tie into the others and some of them feel like, okay, this is just this new car, this new adventure, here's this little episodic thing. And especially in the first season, I didn't like that because I was just like, well, get to the good stuff, get to the reason why she's here, get to the ultimate goal. But then after that goal is established and you understand the framework of the show, going into the other seasons is far more fun to just follow them along on each car's crazy thing. Like,
right.
Because there's so much joy and fun in that, and obviously there's a lot of character growth throughout that. But when you're less concerned about the mystery of it all, you can really just enjoy the journey.
I think that's a good way to put it, for sure. And the journey is so just bizarre. I think I'm repeating myself a bit, but the creativity for each of the cars is so... It's the kind of like freedom in writing that I wanted to have when I was like 13, right? Like, I'm just gonna write it's a story where like whenever I want, I can invent a brand new thing, and it's just absolutely off the wall strange. They go to a car that's that Tulip calls literally just Italy. Like, that's the name of the car. But it's at the beginning of the episode, so you see her leaving and being like, "Bye, Nancy. I hope your pizzeria does well." Like, they leave the car. They've clearly just had this entire adventure that we don't know about.
Yes, all the seasons. There's so much happening off screen.
Yeah,
and they'll just be like trouncing through all these crazy cars. It's great. It truly is such an ingenious concept. The whole concept of the different cars that you're going through, and like the train is trying to help you grow and have the numbers change. That entire concept, I think it could be done like way too sentimental. Like, somebody pops up each time and is like, and now we're learning more about ourselves and like growing as people. And I think the reason it works so well is because they mostly avoid that. Sometimes we do talk a little bit about the specifics of, like, you know, trying to grow as a person. They mostly avoid it, and they really dive into the weird details of it. Like, instead of just taking it on faith that, like, the train is helping us and we're doing a good thing and we're going on a journey to learn stuff. Instead of that, they're like, okay, but how, though? Right.
How does it work? Who's in charge? Who decides how the numbers and stuff work? What happens when the numbers go down? Like, how exactly does this work? And they explore it in such a way that is almost like... There are moments in this show that feel like they maybe didn't need to be so dark, but they were. And I'm not talking about the later ones. We'll get to those. But even in season 1, there are a couple moments where, like, they explore the concept of memory and all the passengers' memory, right? And what they could have done is maybe just, like, the passengers are on the train and maybe someone shows, like, a clean little projector screen and we get to see their memories and it's interesting and we learn about them as people. No. What we need to do instead is have, like, this sci-fi horror, like alien style. It's this giant dark room, and everyone is in this weird like liquid as if they're being preserved or something. And there's robots that come by and pull tape out through their heads, and it's like projector tape, but it's literally coming out of the people's heads, but you don't know that's what it is at the time. So poor Tulip is just trying to figure out what on earth is going on in this car, and she sees what looks like robots killing people and harvesting something out of their skulls. Like, that's what it looks like to her. It's such a bizarre way of showing it. And even though, of course, that's not the case, that's not what's happening, but because they wanted to give that impression and that ambiance, they wanted to have the tone be this weird, abstract, sort of dark thing, even though what's technically happening is mostly good, because the train is arguably mostly good, even though even that has problems, and I would love to get into that at some point.
Oh my goodness. Yes, like the more I think about it, the more I do put this show, edging towards horror, because also in the first season, I remember like Atticus is the corgi that also joins them, and
he's so great.
Atticus is so great, but literally gets killed on screen.
Oh my gosh.
Like on screen gets murdered and then turned into a bug, like one of these horrible, horrific, terrifying, like giant bug things.
You guys. Episode 7.
It's so dark.
Everything changes in episode 7.
It's insane. And then on with season 1 and a few other things, like kind of the climax of this season is we find out that 1-1 is actually the conductor of the train.
Yeah.
And Amelia is a passenger who took over and booted him out and has been rewriting code on the train.
Oh my gosh.
Because she wants to relive her life with her deceased husband.
Right.
Or fiance. Did they end up getting married or did they not? Maybe not.
I think in the later season someone says boyfriend, so maybe they were never. Okay. Yeah, I don't think they got
officially
married. Yeah.
Married, but either way, you get her whole backstory, and like that whole thing is so dark, and then just her taking over everything, and just her desperation, and like it's intense. It's intense.
The way they set that up is so fun. That's a terrible word choice because we're talking about a super dark storyline. The way they set it up is so. The way the story comes together is fun. That's how I'll put it, to sound less like a psychopath. The way that story goes through, they focus on how what Amelia is doing is like trying to use this train to like regain some kind of control and like create a place in which she doesn't have to acknowledge her grief, right? Because she can just have Ulrich back, and right. She doesn't have to face up to everything that really happened. And as time goes on, she makes more and more decisions which hurt other people on the train, which hurt other denizens on the train. Like, those are also more and more things adding up that she doesn't want to face up to, which is physically represented by the numbers, which I thought was so cool, because once most people have on their hand a number that's in like the hundreds, and when you get to Amelia and you see that her number is going all across her arm and even across the rest of her body, and it's in like the trillions of trillions, that was such a bizarre moment, and like I never even considered that could happen, right? But because she's done all these things that keep adding up, and she is purposely avoiding the problem and avoiding facing up to it, that's when things start to click for Tulip. Because, and this is the whole thrust of season 1, she knows that her parents are getting a divorce. She's not like denying it's happening, but she is avoiding processing it, I guess. Like every time one of them tries to talk to her, she's just like, no, it's fine, it's whatever, you guys are doing this dumb awful thing and ruining things, but fine, I don't care. And she'll like hole herself up in her room, she'll avoid her friends, and and this is kind of a lot to ask of someone who's 11, but she isn't really letting herself consider maybe, like, this is a sad thing that's happening, but maybe, like, I can still move forward from this, and I can still love my parents, and I can still find a way to deal with it. And she can't really do that until she's gone on this journey, one, with her friends, one in Atticus, right? But two, until she has met Amelia and, like, seen how she's seen another version of that problem, which is obviously totally different, but in a way, some parts of it are kind of similar. And once she realizes that, it's such a fantastic moment where, because of some memory shenanigans, she's able to see what happened to Amelia. And what she says to the person who showed those memories is, like, I wish you hadn't shown me that, because now that I've seen it, everything is so much harder. And you instantly know what she means by that, because, like, before, the conductor was this spooky figure that's just trying to hurt them, and they don't need to worry about them being a person or them having relationships or trauma they've gone through. And now Tulip is like, well, now I can't avoid those things. I can't avoid the way that I'm actually kind of similar to her. And that's the whole point. I've spoiled the ending, actually. That's the whole point of season 1.
That's what we do here. We spoil things.
Yeah. But I was just really thrilled with how that story turned out, because I don't know if I was entirely expecting, like, deep, heartfelt character introspection from this show, but that's what I got.
Yeah.
And I was just absolutely delighted with it. Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. I just echo everything you said. Like, you articulated this season very, very well, and Tulip's journey and Amelia's journey. And
thank you.
absolutely. Like, Tulip, you know, she also, like, goes back in her memory and is kind of reliving things and she's seen that maybe she had rose-colored glasses on the whole time, and was viewing the history with her parents as something perfect and wonderful that she's losing, but then realizing, oh, right, they were fighting during that memory that I thought was so great, or what have you. And you know, she's like, oh, seeing that happen, not that that justifies it in any way necessarily, but she's just coming to terms with it more. And like you said, I think the big thing is she's not avoiding it anymore. And she's confronting it, and she's gaining more empathy too with Amelia. So
definitely, she'll have a memory play out in front of her where everything's perfect and everything's wonderful, and she has to be like, wait a minute, this isn't what actually happened, and then she has to see the real version. But the opposite also happens, where her parents turn into fire monsters, and they're like, divorce, and, like, it's this awful thing, and she has to be like, wait, that's not what happened either, because they're not, like, these impossible monsters. They're just people who are, like, having not the same problems as me, but a problem just like me, you know?
Because the truth is always more complicated than just the good guys versus the bad guys. You know, like, the reality of things, you know, and it's mirrored in her history and her parents' divorce, and it's also mirrored in Amelia's story, right? Like, it's not just one thing. Like, Amelia is doing some horrible things, but she has so much baggage and so many problems, right? Yeah. So it's just the fact that everything is a little more gray, a little less clear. Like, the fact that her parents are divorcing, it's not her fault, but, like, it's not, you know, it's not like they're the monsters or the evil ones, but it's not like but it's not like she's a victim. You know what I mean? It's like everything is always just more complicated.
I think that would be a pretty decent summary of, like, this show. Like, the moral they're trying to get, if they are trying to get at a certain moral, which I don't know for sure if I'd say they are, but if they were, I would say it's probably problems and, like, relationships and journeys are more gray than they might seem at first. Everything is more complicated and needs to be addressed that way. Like, you can't just assume it'll be one easy solution to fix your problems.
Exactly.
Oh yeah. Oh man. Oh man. Oh man. Oh man.
Alrighty. I just want to say right now, it's really hard for me to choose, but I think book 2 is my favorite.
I could see it. I could definitely see it. Book 2 is the one that I most like on rewatching it this week. Book 2 is definitely the one that I most reappreciated. Like, oh, there's so much more going on here than I realized at first.
For sure.
My personal
Bring us
favorite,
through the basic synopsis.
Yeah. Okay. So there was an episode in season 1 where Tulip found a car that has a couple different names. Some people called it the mirror car. Some people called it the chrome car. But in that car, her reflection was moving around differently, and it wasn't just copying her. And eventually it started talking, and her reflection is like, no, I'm like actually a separate person from you. And they have to solve this whole crazy conundrum of like, okay, if you're stuck in the reflection, can we get you out? Like, how do I open up the door? Do I need your help in the real side of the mirror to do that? And there's mirror police that are trying to catch the reflection, and it's this absolutely crazy thing. But there's a point where things kind of slow down and they actually have a quiet conversation, and like Tulip kind of asks, do you like have a name? And she's like, no, I don't. And they kind of appreciate each other a little more as people. And the reason that's important is because she does get out by the end of that episode, and she actually leaves. She's like, no, I'm not going to travel with you. I want to travel on my own. So as audience, you're already primed, like, this is interesting. I don't know much about this character, but apparently she's her own person, and that was really fascinating. What a cool episode. Season 2 starts, it's her, she's running around, she's the protagonist, and you're just like, this is such a cool idea. I love this idea so much, right?
Yes.
Because she has been, like, in the story of the show, she has been a reflection for her entire quote-unquote life, and now she's not. So she's like this mirrored, chrome-skinned person, and the beginning of the show is her, like, ripping off the sleeves of her shirt, and she uses the wheels of the train to, like, buzz cut all of her hair off, which is wild. Yeah. And she's like running through the different cars, spray painting reflective surfaces so the cops can't get her, and, like, reinventing her entire identity.
Yeah.
And that's an incredible beginning because it's so different from Tulip. It's so completely it's so completely breaking the mold of what we were expecting from this show. And it's all done with this incredible music that I absolutely love, because it comes back later at the end of the season, and it's basically her theme, and I can't say enough about Chrome Canyon, the people who made the music for this show. I forgot to mention it while we were talking about production. Chrome Canyon is awesome. I think this style of music has been called synthwave, although I don't know a ton about that. But the reason I bring it up now is because Lake's theme is incredible, and it almost made me cry. Okay.
Yes.
But that's pretty much the setup. I've just been calling her Lake because I like the name of it, and that's the one she chooses at the end. Even though at this point in the show, she alternately doesn't have a name. Sometimes she has people call her MT for Mirror Tulip, but she even says, that's not my name, that's just what I'm letting you call me, which is such a fascinating line, honestly. But I've been thinking of her as Lake because that's when she chooses. And
exactly. I think that's good.
Yeah. So the setup is just, she's not a passenger. She doesn't have a number, right? But it's still following her as she goes through the different cars.
Well, basically, she runs into a magical deer.
Yes.
That has really random powers, like turning invisible or shooting lasers out of its eyeballs, or disappearing and reappearing, or climbing vertical surfaces. It's very strange, but chaotic. And then Jessie comes along, who's the passenger of this season.
Oh my gosh.
And I'm just gonna like dive into this quick, that I love Jessie, and I love Lake and Jessie as travel companions, because here's the thing. Lake is all about trying to find herself, trying to be free of what people expect or want from her. And Jesse is on the train because he only does what other people tell him to do.
Yes, right? Oh my gosh, it's incredible.
Like, Jesse has this problem of just being a people pleaser. He just goes along with whatever his friends say, even though it hurts other people, and he doesn't like it, but that's just is who he is. Like, he just does things for other people's approval. And here is Lake, the complete opposite, like really trying to be, free from those expectations that other people have on her. And it just makes for like the perfect season.
It's such a great dynamic. The reason I started laughing there is not because like Lake's arc is funny, because it's actually awesome and I love it. But I started laughing because I was looking at my notes about this topic. Jesse, okay. What's so funny, what's so clever about this is that before they know, like before they're fully aware that Jesse's problem is not standing up to people, and before they're aware of that, Lake is basically telling him, hey, you need to listen to me to figure out how to get your number down. So here's what we're going to do. And she's like kind of bossing him around a little bit. And Jesse's like, yeah, okay. But that's the whole problem.
That's the whole problem.
They don't realize it, though.
Oh no, poor Jesse.
Oh,
Plus,
they're
Jesse
both
is
fantastic.
just so fun. Like, personality-wise, Jesse is just like, woo, out there. I'm gonna name this deer Alan Dracula. And Lake is just like, that's not his name. Like, what? Lake is just very straight-laced. And Jesse is just, which sounds odd because she's the one that wants to be free and rebellious, right?
Right.
But she just is a little more serious. Like, I mean, she still has that bit of tulip in her. Like, that's just who she is. And then Jesse is like like a little more crazy, funny. Like, everything Jesse does is hilarious, and I'm all about this character.
Fun. They're so fun, and like them traveling with this incredible magical superpowered deer who seemingly can do anything, but only when he feels like it, is such a great setup, because Jesse thinks he's just the greatest thing on earth, right? And Lake kind of does too, but Lake is also like, guys, we need to keep moving. Like, we need to actually get this done. And Jesse's just like, no, we're singing a song right now. They're such a fun group, honestly, and the way they gradually like Lake slowly opens up to them and becomes more, like, realizes more, oh, I actually have someone who cares for me, and like I care about them too. And Jesse is finally able to like learn more about standing up for himself. Obviously, it's so much fun. Honestly, they just have such a great setup. It's
so great. And I love at the end too that like Jesse is able to leave the train and he gets, sucked off the train, and then Lake is alone again, and then he like fights to come back so that like he can help her escape too. And just the way that all happens, like, first of all, because they end up at the front of the train with one the conductor.
Yep.
And one is like having a mental breakdown because
he's in a logic loop, like the robots in Portal.
Loop.
It's so good.
He's like, well, you can't leave because you don't have a number, and blah blah blah, and
Jesse's here because his new problem is that he has to get his friend off the train, but his friend can't get off the train because she doesn't have a number, but she can't have a number because she's not a human. Like, it's this whole thing. It's so good.
Oh, it's so good. And then it's like building like anticipation and suspense, and then Lake is just like, oh, I'll reflect, because she's made of chrome. She's good. Reflective. Yeah. She reflects the number on Jesse's hand onto her hand. And then she's like, 1-1, I have a number now. Does this work? And he's just like, well, yeah, sure, okay.
It's so good. That moment was like another clue that the train is not like infallible, because it wasn't necessarily sinister. Like, 1-1 is great and we all love him, but when Jesse comes back onto the train with the express problem of, I need to save my friend, that the train needs to help people solve their problems, but they can't do that because Lake can't get off the train. So the number on his hand is like the square root of -1. and it like shifts and cycles between all these different irrational and imaginary numbers. And the train is like it's like the train trying to figure itself out. It's like a fan of the show came up with a fun, cool paradox of like, what would happen if do, but then that's in the actual show and the train is freaking out, right? It's such a fun idea, and it reinforces the stuff that comes up in all of these seasons, which is like the train is morally good with some asterisks. Like, the train is mostly
definitely
good, but there's some problems there, and I just love that so much because they fully explore all of them.
Absolutely.
The season 2, this is partially not me because I think I saw it in a comment from someone talking about the show, but season 2, you really can look at it as a complete shakeup of the entire formula that they used in season 1, which is we have a protagonist and they're going to learn lessons, and that's literally part of the plot in this case, is that they need to learn lessons and they will get to where they're going, and that's that. Season 2 takes like what is by definition a side character, someone who's on the train and is not supposed to leave the train because they're not a human, and makes them the focus. And that's why it's so fascinating when all of the police chase and stuff, when all of that comes to a head with Jesse able to leave the train and Lake not. It feels like the conceit of the show is almost falling apart, because you get an episode where Lake falls off the train. Not only do we not have a human protagonist passenger anymore, we're not even on the train anymore. And she's like, what do I do? Where do I go? And she has this cop who's like still stuck with her because he handcuffed them together at one point. Mm-hmm. And that's one of the most incredible parts of the whole season, I think, is that conversation where he basically he shakes everything she thought about the entire story so far, because he's like, you found Jesse, you helped him learn life lessons, you traveled with him through the train, you are a companion, just like some of those season 1 characters were, and now he's gone, and that's that. Like, this is the way it's supposed to be. And it's so awful to hear him say that and to see Lake kind of doubt herself a little bit, because like, that can't be the case. She is a real person. She is a real character, and we love her.
Right.
But in the moment, it feels so difficult to argue with it, and it feels like there's nothing Lake can say to make herself more confident of that truth, you know?
Exactly. It's like this cop is trying to tell her that she has fulfilled her purpose.
Yes, right?
And she's not okay with that. She's not going to accept that. And so she fights for, again, she continuously just fights for the world like she wants and the life she wants. And she's not going to let other people tell her what that is.
Lake, the way you put that is Lake is fascinating because, like, I don't think necessarily she had a specific flaw she needed to fix. And most of the other characters in this show do. That's the whole point. But Lake, her entire story is about identity and about knowing who she is and being able to hold on to that, even though at every turn other people are telling her that she can't, you know? And I think that's part of the reason she doesn't have a number. Like, in a weird way, she kind of didn't do anything wrong. Like, I feel so bad for her. It's such a difficult situation to be in, obviously, yeah.
Yeah, like, maybe she doesn't have a specific flaw, but she definitely is missing something, sort of. And like what you had said earlier about like relationships, this show is just about relationships. Really, it's like she found herself and who she is through her relationship with Jesse. Like, it's through who she's with that she can discover who she is, you know?
That's a good point. Yeah. Okay. Huh. I hadn't considered that it was tied to Jesse that much, but I think it definitely was. Especially
I think it definitely is, because finally okay. She's not wandering through the train anymore. She wants to get to where Jesse is. Like, she's fighting to get to Jesse. Not, you know? Like, That's her motivation.
Yeah. Oh boy, that makes it even more heartbreaking that, like, before he leaves, like, their last conversation is basically like, I've got you, we're both getting out, we're gonna do this. And then,
Yes.
like he's finally standing up for himself against a certain group of people that we'll get to later, and she is finally realizing, like, oh, there's someone who actually does have faith in me and does want me to succeed, which has never happened before. And, like, they're both realizing the different things about themselves, and you feel like this is where the episode is going. This is great. They hit this moment, and it's excellent. And then, just like we were talking about the last couple seconds, Jesse goes through the door, Lake can't, and you just have to watch him Thanos dissolve away as they're both staring at each other, just going, no, 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 this can't be happening. And then the door is gone. And that's
it. And she's left behind.
That crushed my soul. Like, I was so unprepared for that. And it's not the end of the season. Like we said, they do continue the story and they do get out. But, like, this show, man,
right in the heart. Right in the heart.
Yeah. I would argue this is where the show dips its toes into the pool of, oh, that was super dark. Because Lake does not just escape the police, she does kill them. She does absolutely unequivocally, the guy, like, they're trying to get back on the train, and he basically says, like, no, I'm gonna stop you and pull you back down so we both die. And he literally says, I can't think of a better way to go. Like, he makes it explicitly clear, I'm going to kill you. And Lake is just like, I'm not gonna let that happen. And she grinds him into the wheels of the train. It's really brutal.
It's brutal. It's so brutal. Oh my gosh,
the music and, like, the animation and, like, the look on her face when it happens, it's all just incredible. And that should have been my hint that season 3 was going to be something else. I didn't expect it, though. I didn't expect season 3.
I don't think anyone expected season 3.
Oh boy, you guys, season 3. Oh boy, let's go. Let's talk about it.
Oh boy, oh howdy, oh me, oh my. This is the season. This is the season.
When I watched this show last fall, I finished the first 2 seasons, and both times I thought that was so incredible. There were some things I didn't expect, but I really want to keep going and see what's next. When I finished season 3, I needed to just stop, and I needed to like think about my life for a while because it's not just that it's darker, although I would argue that it is. We'll get to it. So season 3. Season 3 takes a group of characters that we see in a couple episodes in season 2, and it's this crazy twist because it introduces, there is this whole group of, like, I don't want to say feral, but kind of feral kids that have decided, like, we're this big group and we own the train. We just do whatever we want. We smash stuff. We grab things. We take things. We do whatever we want. And
they kind of Lost Boys scenario.
Yeah, they really kind of are. And they have this philosophy, which is, if your number goes up, that means you're getting stronger and you're taking what's yours, because that's what the train is for. The train is people's right. Like, everything that's on the train, humans deserve to just take it. Now, obviously, this is messed up in a lot of ways, but we just haven't heard anyone explore this idea before. Like, what would happen if someone was on the train, but they ended up taking the completely wrong, opposite idea of what's supposed to be happening? Like, that's really interesting on its face, but the more they explore it, the more weird and, like, unsettling it gets. And it's not just this group of kids. Obviously, there are 2 leaders, and they're the main characters, Grace and Simon. And they are basically the figureheads of, like, what they call the apex, right? That's their whole group. They have this crazy, like, red symbol that they draw on their faces. And they believe that... I love this so much. The 2 of them got on the train while Emilia had taken over as conductor, right? So, in season 1, where Tulip and 1-1 are able to get things back to normal and oust Emilia from power, from their perspective, 1-1 is this, like, apocalyptic, like, evil figure who's the false conductor, and he took over the train from its rightful owner. So, in a way, the way they talk about their, like, doctrines and all their philosophies and stuff, it almost feels like a cult, right? Especially because they are...
Oh, it is a cult.
It definitely is a cult. Like, they are these leader figures, and they have this, like, whole group of kids who, like, listen to them, mostly without question, mostly with complete obedience, and they just do whatever they want. And the reason that works so well, in my opinion, is because when Tulip had the whole season 1 thing, looking back, it is a little bit standard for a protagonist. In all the best possible ways. They do an amazing job with it, right? But it is a hero's journey. And then I feel like Lake really changed the mold with that one because of how much that season, like, deconstructed some of the train's ideas. Season 3, it starts with almost completely unlikable, cruel people. It starts with Grace and Simon. And that's such a wild idea that I can't believe they tried it. Because they're so tacitly wrong about their attitudes towards, like, we deserve everything we can take and destroy and everyone else be darned, right? Like, it doesn't matter what the other denizens of the train think because they're not real. So here's the thing.
Yeah.
The Apex is convinced that everyone except humans are not real. They literally don't exist. So it doesn't matter if we destroy their homes. It doesn't matter if we kill them. It doesn't matter what we do because they're just toys. And, like, again, that's so creepy and unsettling. And why are we watching a season about the clear villains? Like, why are we doing this?
Yeah, they are dehumanizing these creatures. And granted, like, and a lot of them aren't human per se, but you know, that same idea of, like, not seeing them as humans means we don't have to give them human rights, and therefore we don't have to treat them with respect.
Yeah. And we've seen 2 whole seasons of characters who do realize that, like, the different creatures and people on this train are all worthy of respect.
Right. Like, Tulip had Atticus and One, and Jesse is, I mean, Lake is a, you know, one of these people of the train, you know? So it's just like, and then here we are, and all of these characters don't trust, and don't see them as anything. Like, they have no value, these characters that we've learned to love through 2 seasons already.
Having that viewpoint come up all of a sudden, having that mindset appear is so jarring, and it feels like you're watching an entirely different show. Because, like, Grace and Simon think they are cool renegade action heroes who are traversing a lawless world and doing whatever they want because they deserve to. And obviously that's not the case, but that's how they think of it. And it's so strange to jump into that story. But obviously that's not the entire season. That's just where they start. And Grace and Simon get separated from their whole group, right? So they have to do this whole journey through the train on their own. And they meet 2 other characters who I struggle to even talk about because of how much weight is behind it. They meet this little girl named Hazel, who's human, and they meet this big gorilla with, like, 2 tubas on her back, and her name is just Tuba. And Hazel and Tuba are tight, right? Like, they're best friends. They've been in this car together, and they basically consider each other family. And the conceit of the season is that Simon and Grace are like, okay, we're going to take them with us. Like, we don't care about Tuba. She's not real. She's not a person. But we do want Hazel to join our group, right? The whole kid, outlaw, Lost Boys deal. So we're going to take them with us. We're planning to ditch Tuba at some point, but we'll take Hazel with us, whatever. So the next chunk of the season is them going on this journey. And, oh boy, Infinity Train does such a good job of foreshadowing what's going to happen, but making you think that even so, there must be hope, right? it must turn out okay in the end, because these four, as weird as it is to say it, because Grace and Simon are very cruel a lot, and they did some awful things, even with all of that, it still feels like these four are bonding and having great experiences and growing to care for each other more, and even becoming a weird little family almost. You get a solid couple of episodes, I believe 4 or so, where they're just going on adventures through the cars. And they're trying to get back to the rest of the people they're looking for. And they're talking to Tuba, and, like, Grace might even be changing the way she thinks about her. You don't really tell for sure. Simon is, like, having occasional fun conversations with the other people, even though he seemed all aloof and serious at first. And you realize, like, they're kind of becoming friends. They're almost becoming, it looks like, a little family. And there's an episode about halfway through where specifically Simon has to work together with Tuba, and he has to realize, hey, we have different perspectives and skills that can help each other. We have different, like, literally in this case, because it was a puzzle based on color, and Tuba was colorblind, so she could easily do it. So they were able to, like, save each other and get through this whole peril, right? And then I was absolutely heartbroken by this and shocked, because I was not prepared for it. Simon just kills Tuba, y'all. Simon just
straight up kills her.
He throws her off the train. Like, no.
And she gets crushed.
Yeah. There is it is not a, oh, maybe she survived. It's not one of those things, because she gets crushed by the wheels of the train. You don't technically see it because they don't want to show blood in this show, but as soon as she hits the wheels, it cuts to the clouds crackling with lightning, and it is such a brutal metaphor for a body being crushed. I just hated it so much, and, like, I wasn't expecting Simon to do it. I wasn't expecting it at that moment, because it seemed like things were going so well. And then, you guys, this show, they did the thing again, where you're so astonished and reeling from what just happened, you're not expecting another twist. So at the end of that episode, when Simon waltzes into the next car and says, yeah, I killed her, like, he doesn't even pretend to hide it, and Hazel runs off crying, you're like, I can't believe he just said that. I can't believe he just admitted it. This is incredible. And then Grace goes to try to comfort Hazel, and Hazel turns into some kind of turtle person, and the episode ends. Like, this show, it does it so many times. You're never ready for it, and I love it so much. They have such a great grasp of what can be accomplished in the last 5 seconds. Like...
Oh my goodness, absolutely. And this is the crazy turnaround of this season, and because you've seen them on this journey, like, and you especially see Grace starting to kind of see the error of her ways and really connect with Tuba and Hazel, and seeing them as more than just props, and then so for you to see Simon, like, kind of starting to get there with Tuba, but then totally reverse any sort of growth he was having.
It's the worst.
It's so hard. It's so hard. And then, like, from here on, right? Like, what's so great about this season is you have both Grace and Simon going through very different journeys, and, like, Grace is learning so much and just becoming so much more open to the world and how she impacts the world, right?
Yeah.
And Simon just keeps getting deeper and deeper and deeper into his own philosophies and into his own very skewed perspectives. And what's fascinating to me is those two characters, looking at Grace and Simon. You know, we throughout the season we also learn, like, there's a recurring character called Samantha, who is the cat.
Oh my gosh.
And she shows up in every season, and she's very sly,
very mysterious,
like, she's always doing whatever's best for her kind of character. And apparently Simon, when he was originally on the train, and again, Grace and Simon have been on the train since they were very young.
Oh yeah.
Simon was going along, and Samantha was his companion, and Samantha left him to possibly die.
Yep.
And then Grace saves him. And
that's part of the foundation of why he was so. Maybe that's not what convinced him immediately, but it is part of the reason he was so ready to believe that the denizens of the train can't be trusted and shouldn't be seen as people. And like that's one of the building blocks that made that happen, you know?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And so when Grace comes in with her ideology, that really she just kind of throws out there because like she's a kid and she's just like, oh, I have a higher number. That's a good thing, you know?
She just makes it up. Yeah.
She just makes it up.
It's heartbreaking.
And this thing that Grace just threw out there is something that he held onto with everything he is and just simmered in him until he became this monstrosity. Yeah. And he ends up just like Amelia with numbers all over his body.
Oh my gosh.
Turns away from Grace even, and they have this very, very, close relationship, and he throws it all away and just like, well, I'm in charge now and I'm going to keep this going and all of that. And that leads us to the end of the season where things get even worse somehow. You'd think it couldn't get worse, but it does.
It gets worse. Oh my gosh. Hazel, in another moment that really caught me off guard, just leaves the show, more or less. She, like, there's a really hectic moment where, like, once they see the mutations in her body and they realize that, like, Amelia helps them understand that Hazel is, like, not technically a human. She's actually a construct of the train, because there's all this crazy stuff with her trying to create new cars and bring her boyfriend back, right? And in those crazy experiments, stuff went wrong and Hazel was created, right? So the reason that's important is because Hazel she just decides to leave. She's like, I don't want to travel with you anymore. Grace and Simon, you are scared of me and you've treated me badly and I'm going to go with her instead. And Amelia's not a great person. She's not like a child-friendly person, but she's like, I don't know, I guess I'll study you because I'm a scientist. And they just leave. And that sucked because it felt like it removed so much of the innocence, I guess. And now you just have Grace, who is horribly regretting everything that's happened and like questioning her entire life setup, and Simon, who isn't questioning things anymore. Simon is just entrenched in this, right?
Even when he's faced with the truth, even when he's faced with Amelia, here's the person that they think is the savior, that they think is the true conductor, and she's just like, nope, I'm not.
No, you were wrong about everything. Yeah.
You were wrong. You guys created this whole cult religion with no basis in truth. Yeah. And he's faced with that fact, that reality, and he completely ignores it. He's just way too far gone. He's so deep into his own perspective reality that's so skewed and so off.
The whole idea of being so just entrenched in a wrong belief, in a lie, that you can't or refuse to change it, even when you have the evidence directly in front of you, that scares me more than anything else in this show. Like, I can't 100% unequivocally hate Simon because I pity him so much. Like, this whole story is so heartbreaking, and it's not because Simon like did nothing wrong or was the victim in all of this. It's because he wasn't the victim. It's because he constantly makes all of these choices that make things so much worse, and that absolutely kills me because there are moments earlier in the show and even a few later in the season where they really focus in on Simon's fear. You see him panic when they see the cat again. You see him fall to the ground shaking, terrified, when he sees even just a statue of one of those Gome monsters, because they were the thing that was chasing him and almost killed him when he was a kid. You see him freak out more and more as he feels like Grace is, quote, slipping away from him, even though obviously she's not. She's her own person. But from his warped perspective that he keeps feeding into, she is hurting him by not being exactly the person he wants her to be. And she's turning him away by not telling him literally everything that's going on. And that that comes to a head in a scene where he says, "You lied to me, everyone's lied to me." And you realize that's what his mind has been and has become, is being absolutely convinced that he's the only one in this entire world who knows the truth, because everyone else is just lying. So like when they meet Amelia, and there's even a visual component too, because when he sees a memory of the conductor, and he literally sees the transfer from the fake memory of this larger than life incredible monster, the real conductor, he sees that actually change back to what really happened, which is just a person in a cape. And Amelia was just a person. And he's heard the entire history. He knows all of this. He's heard it and he sees it, and he can't or refuses to realize that. And like, that kills me so much, because in some ways there are similarities to Tulip trying to finally face up to and admit what's going on with her situation, you know? Like, there are similarities, except at every point Simon makes the wrong choice. Like, I can't just write him off like, oh, he was a villain, he sucked, I hate him, because even though he's done all these horrible things, you follow his story so closely that it feels like a protagonist. You want to succeed and get better.
Yeah, like you see him as a person who writes fantasy novels and,
oh my gosh,
and creates little action figures.
Yeah.
Like you see all these little pieces of himself and his personality and who he is. You see him in his good moments, which make the bad moments that much harder to handle. Like, just like with everything else in this show, everything is so gray, and we do not, forgive him for his actions, like
absolutely not.
at all. It's not okay. Like he became a villain.
Yep.
But he didn't have to be, and that's why it's so hard.
Yeah, that's why this stuck with me so much. And then, like you said, at the end of the season.
Yeah, at the end of the season, he has become the cult leader. Grace comes to challenge him and try to change things. And basically what happens is they end up outside between train cars. One of those monsters comes to attack again. And here's Simon, fighting Grace, and then this monster is here, and he has this opportunity to save Grace and doesn't. Like, he again actively chooses to hurt Grace, and so then through happenstance, through his equipment failing, he ends up in the path of the monster, and on screen you see him disintegrate into dust.
As long as there's no blood, it's probably fine. You can show it in a cartoon. Okay, sounds good. That's like what I imagined happening.
That was probably the
there was technically no blood. Yeah.
But it is horrifying.
I don't think I could stop thinking about that for like a week afterwards, because the fight. Okay, a couple things really quick about that fight scene. When Grace comes back and Simon has gone full megalomaniacal, right? His hair is different. His outfit is different. He's literally having people carry him on a throne. It's such a ridiculous and dramatic scene that it made me laugh, until it hit me that he is framing things in terms of his fantasy novel, because he's literally having trouble separating reality from fiction at this point. And that suddenly made so much sense, because that's what he was doing with the entire conductor thing. He was having trouble accepting the reality that was in front of him. And like, that's what's happening here too. And that just, I was so just crushed by that. But then when they're actually fighting, right? And Simon kicks her away, even though she tried to save him at one point during the fight. She tries to make sure he doesn't fall off the edge. And she does. They're both pulled back up, and the kids watching are like, oh my gosh, thank God no one's gonna die. He kicks her off just because, although we could probably talk for 20 minutes about why he did that. It's, who knows. He kicks her off. She survives, but that's when the Gome kills him, right? And the reason I want to bring this up is because they have foreshadowed over and over in the earlier seasons that the Gome can destroy people, but it has a really, really obvious weakness, which is that if anyone interrupts it at that point, if anyone even lightly kicks it, it'll be stopped. The person will be saved. Which means, in a more symbolic way, all you have to do to survive a Gome is have literally anyone around to help you. And Simon has made absolutely sure that that's not the case. And I just hate it so much because you know they did that on purpose. You know they did it on purpose. Like, it kills me.
He's pushed everyone away, and so no one can be there to help him.
If Grace had, if he hadn't kicked Grace off the bridge, if she had still been there, she easily could have stopped it, and everyone would be alive. But no, he had to push her off. Like, it absolutely kills me. It's, I cannot, like, the character of Simon, and this is a little unfair to Grace because she is the other protagonist, and like a lot of the story is hers, and she's a fantastic character. I love how things change for her, but God, I'm not gonna be able to stop thinking about Simon. Like, that really, really absolutely crushed me.
Oh, it messed me up. And like, here's this show, this show where you know, I feel like going into a lot of these, I'm just waiting for that redemption.
Yes,
like, even with something as horrible as killing Tuba.
Yeah.
I kept thinking there's got to be a start to a change somewhere happening, but they don't. Yeah. They just end his journey there. They just end it.
Yeah,
that's so hard.
Not philosophical exactly, but like the moral idea of some people can be too far gone to save, and it's not your responsibility to save them. I think Grace even says at one point, she's been trying to get him to stop fighting, and at one point she says, like, no, I'm not the cause of your problems. I don't owe you something. And of course, because he's so blind to everything going on, he says, no, you owe me everything, and keeps fighting, right?
Yeah.
And the idea that we have to accept that some people are bad is something that I don't know if I can entirely wrap my head around, because I want to believe that everyone is capable of being a good and even a great person, and that with enough help, everyone can be, you know, to be cheesy a little bit, a hero. And like, I don't think it's a bad thing for stories to give that more, where like everyone is capable of change, everyone is capable of good things. Those stories are fantastic and we need them constantly, right? But at the same time, it's really, really hard to have a story like this where that is not the case, and it's so difficult to think about. And yeah, that's why this season in particular is something I don't think I'll ever forget.
Never.
When we were talking about recording this episode, I pitched the idea of like, okay, here's what I want to do. I want to talk about Infinity Train seasons 1 and 2, and then I want to have a full stop, and then we'll talk about season 3, because that is a whole other beast.
It's a whole other thing, for sure.
Gosh.
To piggyback off of what you were saying, like, for me personally, like, in my beliefs, I do think that everyone is capable of being the hero, as you say.
Oh, yeah.
Like, that's how I view the world. But, like, for this show in particular, like, I think it basically ends up being one of those warning type fables, I guess, of like, this is what could happen to you. Like, this is the scary fairy tale where it's like warning you about something.
Oh, yeah.
But and I don't know how to, it's hard to deal with. It's hard to look at.
I don't want to sound like I'm saying Infinity Train said some people are pure evil. I don't want to come up like I'm saying that, because I'm not.
No, they're introducing complex ideas for us to sit here and talk about and discuss and think about.
Yeah.
But like, if I'm just thinking about it story-wise, right? Like, here's this narrative that's giving viewers maybe a warning, but also another thought I had is like, well, maybe if we look at this strictly as Grace's story, then it is that that concept of it's not your responsibility, and that's okay. and that she tried her best. I don't know, because like from my perspective, I'm like, it kind of was her fault that he ended up like this in some ways, because she's the one who introduced this philosophy to him.
She does have a lot of that blame in how all of this started, for sure, and that's a big part of her her whole memory sequence near the end of the season, is she has to face up to a lot of that.
Exactly. But like, and she also tries her best. Like, she tries her best after she has learned better and done better. Like, she tries. And maybe part of it too is maybe if she had, talked to him about it sooner. Like, she keeps trying to hide Hazel and keeps trying to pretend to be, to go along with what he says, even though she doesn't believe that, and she ends up, lying to him, and he's more hurt by her lying than her having a different opinion. And
right.
And it's just like, well, maybe if she had been able to speak more. And again, all of this, like, not saying that obviously Simon is responsible for his own actions.
100%.
But thinking about it as Grace being the protagonist, like, what could she have done, or what things were different, or like, where did she go wrong?
Yeah, she hurt Hazel. Like, she's absolutely made lots of mistakes and horrible choices. I don't think it's unfair to look at those in the light of like how things could have been different. It's I don't think it's unfair to do that just because Simon also made terrible choices for himself, Like, those two are both things that happened. It's yeah.
And then the last thing I want to say about book 3 is that, again, I do like this choice to end the season not with all the loose ends tied up, but just that prospect of hope of, we never see Grace and her clan like get off the train. We never see them get off the train. Nobody leaves
in this season.
Nobody gets off the train. But we do see her starting to try to help the kids. And I like that, because it gives us an opportunity to imagine what it's like. It doesn't give us that like firm quote unquote happy ending, because this season and what they did with Simon, they could not end that way. But like, we see the start of change. And I think that is almost more hopeful and more positive than just giving us all of the answers, right? Because like, it just makes me feel like there's hope in that. And it makes me feel too that it's like, it's okay if you're at the beginning of your journey or in the middle of it, like, it's okay that, if you're trying to change things, that you're still in the process of that, because we're always still in the process of change. And so I just like to imagine that Grace helped all of the kids off the train, and maybe, as she slowly, she has a lot of numbers, she has really high numbers. So like, as she slowly lowers her number, that she's helping other passengers, just like, I like to imagine that. And I really hope that she gets to see her family again someday.
Oh my gosh, yeah. It's so it definitely is that hopeful note, because like, even while she's talking to the kids at the end, and she's saying like, we have to stop what we're doing, we have to look at things differently. But she also highlights the fact that like, but I can't just tell you how to do all that. I can't just be the leader anymore, right? And while she's saying all this stuff, the kids' numbers are going down. Maybe only by a little bit at first, but it's already happening, And you're starting to see how that's coming to pass, yeah.
And maybe that's it. Maybe this season is just saying like, pay attention to how you influence people. Pay attention to like how what you do affects others, because I think that's ultimately what Grace has to learn, and how these conflicts all come about is because, and throughout their journey, right? Because she said something kind of offhand that turned into Simon's demise, and here she is now trying to say things and help people through it, and that they were disregarding other people's lives and property and emotions, as the people of the train, and then changing their point of view there too. So this season, there's so much to digest. There's so much to think about it. We could talk about it for another hour.
Right. Yeah.
But like that's what Infinity Train is. It's great.
It's really something
It's complex.
special.
It's hard. It's
Y'all,
it's a crazy, wild show.
Even for just season 3, I have so many more notes that I could try to talk about right now, but there's just no time. And like, there's so many little details and little subplots, and that's just season 3. Like there's so much, and it really is worth your time.
Absolutely worth your time. So after that dark, depressing story, I think even the writers knew they went a little too far. Season 4 takes a nice hard right turn into fun, happy, silly adventures.
It's much more lighthearted for sure. Not to say there's no emotion or drama in it, because that's not true, but it definitely is such a relief. Oh my goodness.
Oh my gosh. And it definitely is up there in my favorites for sure.
And like you said earlier, with the planned future seasons, this was probably, again, just like it's a relief from season 3, it was probably also supposed to be like a deep breath of fresh air before season 5.
Yeah, yeah.
I can only imagine would have been very serious again.
Oh, I'm sure. I am absolutely sure.
But there's quite a big emphasis on the more lighthearted silliness in this one. It's a good time.
It is a great, grand old time. With this one, we actually change time periods.
Oh yeah, yeah.
So, and you know what? I didn't even think about it, but forgive me if I'm wrong. Is it the 70s?
I believe it's the 80s. I think I looked it up, and I think it said the 80s. And
that makes sense, because his little musical instrument is very techno electronic synth thing.
Oh yeah, and we're talking cassette tapes. We're talking payphones. I'm trying to think if there's anything else that gives you a good clue. But I'm fairly sure we're somewhere in the 80s. Yep.
Yes, and so
in Canada.
Yeah. We've got Ryan and Min-gi, our two protagonists, and this is what's so different about this season is we've got two passengers arriving on the train at the same time, which is, even in the story, and a very unusual thing that people point out, that they share a number. So again, it is very deeply their number is connected to their relationship. Their problem is their relationship, and the fact that they have,
it's a problem.
They have kind of they've been best friends their whole lives. They had plans to they created this band, and they had plans to travel around and be in this band, and Min-gi gets pretty scared of that and kind of runs away from it. Ryan keeps moving forward with his plans, and they become separated. And I just want to say right off the bat, the scene, that, the whole sequence really of their backstory. There's this whole episode about the backstory. The
split screen thing?
The split screen. I loved it so much.
Oh my gosh.
So you've got this split screen, and you have on one side it's Min-gi, and one side it's Ryan, and they're going off and doing all their own things. You can see Min-gi is working, and Ryan is going to all these concerts, living in a van, and blah blah blah. And then what happens is you slowly see them start going to the same place, and then they end up conjoining by a door, and you see, I love at the end, because Ryan ends up going to the restaurant where Min-gi is working.
Yeah.
And
he's flipping the sign from open to closed.
yes,
yeah.
and then there they are on either sides of the door, but you as the audience see both of their perspectives looking at the other person.
Yes.
And I'm like, that is so clever. And then it conjoins with the door, and then Ryan enters into Min-gi's split screen. And I'm just like, this was so clever and so well executed. It made me so happy.
That first episode is such a fascinating, like, I don't want to say animation style, because the animation itself isn't, like, different, but the framing, I guess?
Yeah.
The way they told this part of the story, because it's almost kind of like a montage, sort of. It skips a little bit of time, but you get all of these moments that line up perfectly, and you immediately you can understand the problem here,
Right.
And you can understand, like, how they have drifted apart, but in some ways they still... There's a bit in that montage where Ryan is playing a concert, and miles and miles and miles away, Min-gi is, like, tapping out, he's just playing around with that dumb little mini synth, right? But it's the same song. And
Yes.
immediately I'm emotional. We're like 3 minutes into this episode in this season, and I'm already like, oh my gosh, I get it. Like, I understand. It's straightforward, yeah, but I get it,
Yes.
And oh boy, that opening is just great.
So good. It's so good. And so, of course, we've got the two of them stuck on the train. They run right into Kez right away. And let me tell you,
Yeah.
Kez is second runner-up for my favorite character of this entire show.
Oh, Kez.
Kez is a
Kez.
bell. And not just any bell, a bell that you ring for service. Like,
Yeah,
ring
one of the ones that you just, like, tap your hand down.
Ding,
Ding.
ding.
Yeah.
And she floats and she's a magical
Sparkles.
floating talking bell. And she is so fantastic. She is the chaos of this season, and I love her so much. Everything out of her mouth, I am just like, I love you, Kez. Just
She tries to explain what the train is. And if you're watching season 4, you probably already know, like, what's going on, right? You know about the numbers and the personal journeys and stuff. And that's a good thing, because Kez's explanation is so nonsensical.
oh my goodness. Yeah.
She's like, okay, so you know, like, pockets, and, like, you can, like, reach inside the pocket, and there's stuff in the pocket, but it's not out of the pocket. And, like this is like a pocket. And you opened up the pocket, and they're just staring at her, like, no expression, like they have no idea what she's saying.
Oh, I love it.
It's not helpful at all.
Not at all.
Oh, she's great.
She is so
my goodness.
fantastic, and she kind of leads them through everything. And what I love about this season is, like, the two of them, Ryan and Min-gi, like, for a time they think that Min-gi just got, like, sucked into this with Ryan on accident, and maybe it's all of Ryan's problems that they're dealing with. And so it becomes this very interesting dynamic of, like, Min-gi is like, well, I'm right, here's how you should fix your problems, and Ryan is feeling really bad about that because that sucks. But then it's like, no, actually, you are also the problem, Min-gi. Like, you both have issues to work out, and I just love their friendship. And okay, one of my favorite episodes is the concert that they are supposed to give, because they finally get into this party or whatever. And by the way, side note, Kez's friends are hilarious, and, like, her interactions with
they're
them,
awful.
yeah, because they're, like, the worst friends, and but
They're just terrible people, yeah.
and Kez is like, oh yeah, and you finally see Kez as, like, she's saying, like, talking up all these things, but in reality, her friends are crap.
Yeah. And they're just mean to her. They just
Yeah.
laugh constantly, and she's like, "Haha, yeah, that's. I mean, I wasn't really trying to be funny, but yeah."
I
And, like,
know.
you feel bad, yeah.
It turns Kez even more into a well-rounded character, and I love it.
Definitely. Yeah.
But in that episode, they're like, oh, we're gonna do a concert for everyone at this party, and Ryan is all for it, ready to go, and Mingi is not. Like, he hides in the and what I love is that instead of becoming this big triumphant thing, like they're finally getting their relationship together by performing on stage together, and it's going to be a wild success and everyone's going to love them, it turns into the two of them having a real discussion about themselves in a bathtub, and then they sit in the bathroom and they play together, but it's just for them. And I love that so much.
That was such a good twist of what I was expecting, because I actually did think we were going to get to see them play that concert, because we still never had at this point. So I thought we were finally, and then because I think Mingi is even like, yeah, no, I'm ready, let's do this. And then while they're walking onto the stage, pretty much the exact same thing happens as when they were in high school, which is something reminds him, in this case, it's like the keys that he had earlier in the show for being the manager who's closing up the restaurant, right? Like, that reminds him of all of the anxiety, all of the panic, and like all of the other stuff he has in his life, and he just bails and he runs away from the stage, right? So when that happened, I assumed the crux of the episode was going to be Ryan getting him to get over that and coming back on stage. And instead they don't do that, because what's more important than solving that immediate problem, which isn't even really a problem, but solving that immediate situation, what's more important than that is Ryan and Mingi finally talking about it, right?
Exactly.
And finally taking at least a step, not all the way, but at least a step towards like understanding each other better. And that's when, Mingi admits that like he's frustrated with himself for being the guy who like can't just get up and go and do it like Ryan does,
Mm-hmm.
But he's also terrified of and I thought this was really interesting. He's also very afraid of like he says, do you really even think we could do what you want to do? Like, there aren't even any people out there who look like us.
Yeah.
Like, he's talking about kind of the rock band scene, I guess, and he's talking about the very real pressure and concern that, like, there aren't a lot. I mean, this is what I'm picking up from what I've heard from other people. It's not something I personally know much about, but there isn't and it's certainly not in the 80s. There wasn't exactly like a huge amount of non-white rock artists, right, that were getting popular and going on tours and stuff. And certainly not Asian Americans from Canada, because that's awfully specific. And like, it's something that I hadn't considered because I'm a white guy, I hadn't put it together. But like, that's part of the anxiety, and that's part of why he's so hesitant to just go for it like Ryan always does,
Yes.
And Ryan, in that moment, he takes off the thing he was using as a headband, and it's the t-shirt that they had from their very first show. And like, that made me start crying, because that was such a great moment. And like, oh my gosh, there isn't like some incredible character realization there, but it was just such a sweet thing to do. And he was just like, yeah, I still have this. Like, I still remember back when we were just starting this whole plan, And in that way, he kind of reassures him, even though he doesn't literally come out and say, everything's going to be fine, and I think we're going to be a band, and it'll be great. He just, he just has the shirt, and he chats with him about, like, some famous albums they really love, and then they just play a song. And something about that scene being so quiet and calm and small, in a way, weirdly made it stand out even more, because like it was such a, I don't want to say a change of pace, because the show has done a lot of that, but it really stuck out as something special. Yeah,
because like, we are, as an audience, are conditioned to see those big impactful moments as big triumphant, loud scenes, right?
Yeah, especially like, after season 3.
Yeah. I mean, like, from my perspective, like, it should be like, oh, that they they do the big show and it's this big thing and that's the big moment.
Right.
But what they did and what's so genius and what I love so much is that they make this very, very big moment a very, very small external experience inside of a very tiny bathroom. Like, I love that choice. I love it so much. They subverted our expectations, first of all, and then they made it even more meaningful because it's not about them being, this great band to everyone at the party. It's about them reconciling their relationship to each other.
That's interesting because Ryan has such a different attitude about this show in particular than Min does, because he, like you said, it's not about impressing these people at the party. Like, I wonder if it's because he has so much more experience where he's been trying to do shows for a long time now, but Ryan doesn't care about this show. Like, sorry, that's not a good way to put it. He doesn't care about this crowd.
Right, he sees this as the easy, like, super easy show to do because, like, it's not high stakes at all.
He's trying to convince Min-gi, like, there's no pressure. We're never going to see these people again. This is great. This is the best, like, there's literally no reason to be nervous. But Min-gi can't see it that way, and he's just, like, freaking out more and more, even though these are people that they truly have zero connection with, and they will probably never see again. But he still can't do it, and that's such... that difference in how they see the act of performing and the act of playing songs, I think that really plays into, like, certainly what we saw at the beginning of the show where he did the same thing in bailing at the high school show, but also, like, how they think about their relationship, if that makes sense. Because Min-gi is so bogged down with a lot of, like, he has to keep and I don't think this is a bad thing. He has to keep considering the other things that he has waiting for him in his life, and school applications, and the pressure of his parents, and, like, his job, and all of these different things he's built up, and he has to keep those things in mind, which makes sense. Like, people have lives. You can't just absolutely drop it all. Like, I absolutely sympathize with him on that point. But Ryan doesn't see it that way. Because from literally the first scene of the season, Ryan just does stuff.
Yeah.
Like, this is such a good example of that. When they get on the train... Ryan and Min-gi are both staring there at this, like, horrifying bright light vortex, and it looks so ominous, and it would be a terrible idea to go towards it. And Min is just like, no, nope, don't. And Ryan just runs in for no reason. He just jumps in.
But
and then, like, if anything could perfectly describe the differences in their personalities,
it's that moment.
It's Ryan always has the attitude of, like, let's just do it. It's probably going to be fine. And that has its own flaws, but it's also such a counterpoint to Min's problems, you know?
Right.
And, like, what killed me is at the beginning of the season, I thought that was very funny and wonderful and great. And then at the end, you find out why he just goes and does stuff all the time. And it just killed me. But before that, there is another very dark moment. Which is not... There aren't a ton in this season. It's mostly a lot more lighthearted. But there is one episode. It is called The Art Gallery Car. Where things take a bit of a turn.
Oh, boy.
So they just had the moment where they reconciled a little bit and they played the song together, and you think things are going good, and they get to a new car, which is just a giant empty art gallery, right? And it's very cold for some reason, and there's just these, like, still frozen, well, paintings are always still and frozen, but you get what I mean. Like, in this context, it feels like everything is still
and frozen. It feels ominous.
Yeah. And things just start getting worse. Like, they start arguing with each other for seemingly no reason, and everyone seems super mad, and there's weird shadows everywhere. And then you start seeing, like, specific shadows, like hands reaching for them right on their head for some reason. And there's guys, there's a monster made out of hands. I don't know how else to put it. There's a monster that's made, and I can't emphasize this enough, made out of hands. And I really just want to stress that there's a hand monster. And that would be unsettling enough on its own, except it's implied that somehow that thing was, like, messing with their emotions and their thoughts and how they feel about each other to not make things out of nowhere, but definitely to heighten all of those problems and to bring them to the surface. And suddenly, you've got these two people who you thought were doing pretty okay in the previous episode. Suddenly everything is coming to light, and they're so angry about all of their past failings and how each one feels the other one has let them down in the past, and, like, the things they're most frustrated with about each other. You kind of knew they were there. It's not like their relationship was great before, but it's such an honest and sobering moment of, like, realizing that the problems were more complicated and more specific than you thought they were. And in that way, it feels really relatable, because, like, the frustration of, you know, having a lot of responsibilities in Min-gi's case, like, that is tough enough on its own. I can't imagine what it would be like if you had all of those things and also a best friend who felt the exact opposite way, and that you should drop all of them and go do this crazy road trip.
Right.
And Ryan, like, being worried that maybe you're dumb, or maybe you don't think about things in advance, or maybe you're just lazy and you don't care about responsibilities, worrying about those things would suck. How much more would it suck if you have a best friend who's telling you to your face, you are dumb, you are, like, bad at making plans, and you've messed up my life with some of your mistakes. Like, both of these sides are just brutal, and they're not brutal in a way where people are dying or getting disintegrated. They're brutal in a way that, like, I kind of get, because that's a lot closer to real life, you know? That's a lot closer to real relationships. And I think that's what makes this scene so really uncomfortable. It's not just the creepy hand monster, although that's a big part of it, don't get me wrong. It's also I can get that. Like, I can see these problems. I can so easily imagine having those problems, you know? Like, that was tough to watch.
Yeah. But of course, their relationship does get mended, and they, you know, go on to bigger and greater things. So what would be your, you know, takeaways at the end then? What are your...
Yeah. There's one point in the ending that is going to stick with me, I think. And the whole ending sequence, the last couple episodes, is like a little bit of a side plot gets introduced. That's this whole thing about a different passenger who had been in this car in the past, but, like, was able to leave because their number got to 0, and that really hurt a lot of the people who are still there. And it has to do with Kez, and it turns into this big complicated thing about, like, being responsible for other people's happiness, and, like, I don't feel the need to go into super detail about it, but with Ryan and Min-gi, they do come to more of an understanding of each other, and it might happen a little fast for my liking. I think the rest of the season is a bit stronger for sure.
I would agree.
But
the ending feels a little rushed.
Yeah. They do talk about a little bit of what's been going on with them, and they're able to come to the agreement that they both really dismissed a lot of what the other one was feeling and saying. And I think that's probably the strongest part, because they definitely did, you know? But what really gets me is there's a moment where Ryan says, oh gosh. So after the monster car, Ryan had an opportunity to leave. His number actually went down to 0. And the door was right there and he could leave. And he stood there and he looked at it. And what's weird is that him considering leaving Min behind made his number go back up and made the door vanish. Which personally, I think is another point towards, even though the train is a force for good, it's also got some weird sketchy stuff going on. Like, that's a mean trick, right? Like, that's not really okay. But the point is, Min felt like Ryan left him at that moment. Because Ryan was the one to leave the room first, and Ryan couldn't get back in, even though he just genuinely had no way to get back in, so he couldn't go back and save him. But he technically did leave first. So Min is angry at him because he, quote-unquote, left me there to die, right? Like, it's a really emotional moment. But as the ending episodes go on, he kind of changes his attitude about that, and he realizes that, like, that's not really what happened, you know? And Ryan, his thoughts go the other way. He feels worse and worse and worse about what happened because he's convinced, like, I almost took the door. Like, I almost took that opportunity to leave, and that's unforgivable, right? And while they're trying to get over that and have this conversation, Min says something that really just caught me off guard, which is, okay, you didn't leave me to die, though. You just had a bad thought. Like, I have those all the time. And for some reason, that stuck with me, you know? Because that really cut through all of the worry and all of the panic and, like, Ryan thinking of himself as this awful, irredeemable person for what he did. And that line suddenly brought it all back to, like, no, you're just a person, you know? Like, you just thought about a thing.
Right.
Like, that happens, you know? This isn't the end of the world. This isn't... I don't know. Something about that really sticks with me. And I think it's because, again, that's something I do understand, you know? Like, I've never been in a situation where I physically ran away from one of my friends and they almost died. But I definitely have been in the situation where I feel awful just over something I was thinking about, you know?
Yeah, I think everyone does.
Trying to help yourself understand and believe that that's not such a terrible thing, and it doesn't mean you've hurt someone unforgivably. That's something I can't understand, and that really got me in this last episode. So
for sure.
even when they, you know, they're kind of apologizing for a lot of what happened, and they're finally able to leave, and they kind of make amends with Kez, even though that relationship was rocky for a while. That's the part of it that stuck out to me the most, for sure, is that they didn't just forgive each other. It's also that they understood each other, you know? Like,
yeah.
By the end of this season, they aren't just saying, oh, you did something bad, but I forgive you. They're saying, like, you did something that hurt me, but that doesn't mean you're a bad person. Like, it doesn't mean I'm better than you or anything like that, because they both have this might have been better to say at the beginning of the season 4 talk, but, like, having Ryan and Min be so different, I think worked super well because of how specific it got, which is the easy route would have been that Ryan is carefree and Min is careful, and, like, that's all there is to it, and that just pops up a few times, and then they realize we should be more like each other, and that's the end of the story, right? But instead of that, they go into such specifics of how they've treated each other in the past, which, again, they both feel like the other one has left them at different points. Ryan because Min bailed on some of the concerts, and Min because Ryan literally just took his van and went across the country. He just started doing shows. There's that. There's the parents thing. Oh my gosh. At one point, they're both arguing with each other, but they're almost playing devil's advocate a little bit, like, once they've changed their attitudes. And Min says, like, yeah, of course I have all these things going for me. I have my studies, and I have this job, and I have, like, I have all this stuff that I'm supposed to do, but it's just because my parents want me to do it. And Ryan immediately says, yeah, because your parents care about you. Like, I only have people who notice me when I'm doing stuff. And I suddenly had to stop the episode. I'm like, that recontextualizes everything.
Yeah.
That's why he's been just going for it and doing things all the time and making this big name for himself. And, like, even when he was a kid, he was trying to put on a show, right? And, like, all attention has to be on me, because if he's not doing those things, that attention just isn't going to be there. And for Min, it's the exact opposite. His parents have a very strict and specific set of things that they want him to accomplish, and he can't imagine not fulfilling that, you know? And like just the parents aspect thing alone, even if you removed how they treat each other, how they feel about each other in the past, even if you removed all of that other stuff, just the expectation of their families would make this relationship so much more interesting than simply one is happy and one is a bit stuck up, you know? I can't express how good the writing is on this relationship. It really is something special to watch.
It really is superb. It's one of my favorite seasons. And it just, it just makes me wishing for more. And I do hope that someday Owen Dennis is able to continue the Infinity Train story.
Yeah, and people are trying to make it happen. They're trying to petition HBO Max. They've been trying to make some noise online on Twitter and stuff. Because there was I believe it was on Reddit, he had a big Ask Me Anything, right? And he went into a little bit of detail even about, like, here's what 5 would have been about, here's what 6 through 8 might have been about. And he even answered specific questions about some characters and places that we've already seen. And he was very forthcoming with, like, oh yeah, I absolutely wanted to make way more, and unfortunately it's not happening. I don't know how likely or even possible it is that could happen, but the support is out there for sure.
For sure. So hopefully, but we'll see what happens. You never know. Obviously, there is so much more to say about Infinity Train. Oh, yeah. We could go on forever, but we just can't. But let us know your thoughts about Infinity Train. You can email us at fanimatedpodcast@gmail.com or reach us at Facebook and Instagram at fanimatedpodcast. Thanks to the Patreon crew. Patreon.com/fanimated is where you can find bonus episodes. You can vote for upcoming episode topics. We got some polls up right now. Let us know what we should be watching, what we should be talking about. You can leave us a review wherever you're listening right now. And the music is provided by Purple Planet Music, and the art is done by myself. And Jamie, why don't you let them know where they can find you and hear your voice more on the podcast airwaves?
Well, Kelly, that's a great idea. If you have heard some of the episodes I've been in, you might know about something called Knight's Quest, which is a podcast. It is a fantasy improvised RPG podcast. It's kind of like Dungeons & Dragons. There's a lot of dice rolling. There's a lot of D&D-esque situations. But it is a game of our own make that we're just calling Knight's Quest, the same as the name of the podcast. Basically, it's just this really goofy, very occasionally dramatic, but mostly goofy. It's mostly comedic. And we have this whole big story going on with a whole big cast of characters. We're in our 3rd season, so things have been going pretty darn well. And I think the only other thing that's important to mention is that there is not safe for work language, so be careful of that if that's not something you're into. And yeah, give it a listen. You can start at the beginning, or you can start at season 2. Once we got a lot of better equipment and we changed a lot of things about our show, we tried to make season 2 a good starting point if people wanted to start there. So that might be a little bit more accessible than some of the lower quality ones in season 1.
Yeah, definitely recommend. It's a lot of fun. Season 2, jumping into season 2 is a great place to start. I mean, season 2, the beginning of season 2 has one of my favorite scenes ever with Katrina below deck.
Yes.
If you know what I'm talking about, you know what I'm talking about. And she is always doing some sort of drinking contest, and that's one of my favorite scenes.
The drinking contest became a fan favorite for sure.
Absolutely. And again, that's Knight's Quest with a K, as in Knights in Shining Armor.
Yep. It should be on every podcast platform I can think of. If we're missing any, we'll try to get that figured out, but it's on iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play, all that stuff. The website is kqpodcast.com.
Great.
And that has our merch. There isn't a ton right now, but we're coming up with new ones constantly. It has links to just listen to the episodes. It has links to the music, which is written by myself. So definitely check it out if that sounds like something you'd be interested in.
Yeah. Thank you again for joining me, Jamie. This was super fun.
Yeah.
I always love to geek out about our favorite crazy, dramatic,
absolutely.
and heartfelt shows. So, I'll look forward to our next conversation, whatever that might be.
Yeah, I can't wait. This has quickly become one of my favorite shows, so I was really excited to be here.
Oh, thank you so much. Oh man. All right, well, thank you guys so much for listening. We will talk at you next week, and in the meantime, stay tuned
and stay animated. This will not make it into the recording, but there's a part in season 2 where Jesse, over a couple of different scenes, develops a song about traveling and being friends, which he calls Travel Friends. And it's just travel friends brought together by the majesty of a superpower deer, or something like that. It's really good.